If someone you love betrays you, do you scream? Do you stay silent? Or do you walk into a room full of billionaires, transfer $42 million in front of live cameras, and leave without shedding a single tear? Welcome to Mr. Hearthline Stories. If you've ever believed that dignity is louder than revenge, that a quiet woman walking away can shake an empire, then you're in the right place. Please take a second to like this video, subscribe to our family, and drop a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from, or just say, I am with you, Mr. Hearthline. The world had opinions, but Delaney only had memories. She closed her eyes and let her mind drift. Past the betrayal, past the office, past the day it all shattered, to one final morning before everything went cold. It had been spring. Their penthouse had smelled of eucalyptus and linen. She had woken to the sound of him humming a song he used to sing when they were broke and happy, before boardrooms and private jets became his playground. Nico was beside her, tracing invisible shapes on her stomach, his lips following his fingertips. With reverence, "You're still my favorite chapter," he whispered, voice cracked from sleep. "I'd rewrite every line just to get back here." He hadn't made love to her that way in months. His hands had trembled like he was holding a miracle. His mouth traveled over the swell of her belly as though their baby was listening. His breath had caught when she moaned his name. Her fingers tangled in his hair. The sun painted their skin gold, but she remembered feeling something deeper, like grief dressed up as intimacy. Even as he entered her, slowly, deliberately, as if to prove something to the unborn child. Between them, Delaney had known. He was slipping away. Now, in the present, she sat alone in that Brooklyn apartment with nothing but that memory for warmth. Her eyes locked on the dusty envelope resting on the table. The one Nico had once mocked. "Our silly little post-nup," he'd called it, laughing at the kitchen counter while she'd drafted it like a fool in love. "If you're reading this," the voiceover whispered in her head, "it means he hurt you, and you're thinking about disappearing." It was her own voice, from 10 years ago, a letter she wrote to her future self before the wedding, back when love still felt like a safe place to land. She unfolded the letter again, her handwriting shaky but clear. "Fight for your peace harder than he fought to keep you." Her stomach turned as her palm grazed her belly. The baby fluttered faintly, like a reminder. She hadn't cried yet. Not when she saw Sloan. Not when she walked out of the office. Not even when she signed the transfer order for $42 million. But now, as thunder cracked in the distance and the baby shifted again, Delaney exhaled a broken sound, a sound not quite a sob but not far from it. In the other room, the faucet dripped. Steady. Predictable. Unlike Nico. She thought of all the things he had promised. A home. Family. Forever. And now she was hiding in a rented apartment in Brooklyn with fake paperwork, a burner phone, and a silence that threatened to bury her alive. But she wasn't destroyed. Not yet. She had a letter. She had a plan. And in that moment, she wasn't just a broken wife with a full womb. She was a woman about to make a billionaire beg. The rain had eased by midday. Delaney pulled into the underground garage of Callahan Industries with Thai takeout in one hand and a small, glossy envelope tucked into her purse, the ultrasound print from her last visit. Their baby had finally turned. The nurse had laughed and said it meant good luck. Delaney hadn't laughed, but she'd smiled, because she was going to surprise Nico with the photo, because she still believed in that moment, in him. She stepped into the private elevator and pressed the top floor. Her pass still worked. That meant he hadn't revoked it. She took that as a sign. The executive floor of Callahan Industries was too quiet for a Wednesday. The front receptionist glanced up, startled. "Mrs. Callahan." "Oh, I didn't know you were coming." Delaney offered a soft smile. "Surprises are the only thing left in this marriage. Camille thought I'd bring lunch." The girl looked down nervously. "He's in a meeting." Delaney murmured, already walking toward his office. She didn't knock. She never had to. The moan came before the door opened. Not a cry of pain, but a slow, breathy sound, followed by a groan that didn't belong to her husband. Delaney froze for 2 seconds. Then she pushed the door open. The image burned itself into her mind instantly. Sloan Rivas, her husband on her knees, blouse hanging open, hair wild. Her lipstick was smudged across Nico's lower stomach. His hands were in her hair, not pulling away. Nico's eyes widened the second he saw Delaney. He stepped back. Sloan didn't even stop. It was Delaney who broke the moment. Not with a scream, not with rage, but with silence. She walked forward calmly, set the takeout bag on his glass desk, then reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. One photo. Click. Sloan finally froze. Her mouth parted. Her hands shook as she scrambled up. Delaney didn't look at her. She looked directly at Nico. "You forgot your lunch," she said, and turned around. No tears, no demands, no confrontation, just an exit, the kind a man never forgets. She walked back through the executive wing without a word, back down the elevator, back into the car. Her hands didn't tremble until she reached the freeway. And even then, she didn't cry. Not until she pulled into the underground vault at the Midtown Private Banking Center. Delaney sat across from a senior banker whose name she couldn't recall. All she remembered was how his hands stopped mid-typing when he saw the numbers on her screen. "You're moving the full amount?" he asked. She nodded. 42 million. To the trust. Today. He blinked. "Is everything all right, Mrs. Callahan?" She smiled. "It will be. Once it's no longer Mrs. Callahan." That night, Delaney returned home to the penthouse alone. Nico didn't follow her. He didn't call. She didn't expect him to. She pulled out the dusty envelope from the kitchen drawer. The one labeled, Postnup. Agreement, emergency use only. Nico had laughed at it once. "Why do we need this, Laney? You think I'm going to cheat?" She remembered shrugging, saying, "It's just for peace of mind." He had kissed her temple and tossed it aside. Now she opened it, reviewed the terms. One clause glared back at her. Clause 7b. Infidelity results in complete forfeiture of spousal rights and shared assets. He had signed it, casually, with a glass of wine in hand. And now it was about to ruin him. Delaney exhaled slowly, cradling her belly. "You won't have to grow up learning how to beg for respect," she whispered. "That's my gift to you." She turned off every light in the house, packed only what she could carry, and slipped out into the city like a shadow with a pulse. 3 hours before sunrise, Delaney sat alone at a corner table in an all-night diner just outside Queens. Her coat draped around her like armor, and her wedding band lay on the counter next to her untouched tea. The diner smelled of burnt toast and cheap syrup. A teenager mopped the floor nearby, earbuds in, oblivious to the woman recalibrating her life one line item at a time. Delaney's laptop glowed softly. Her eyes didn't blink as she reviewed the transfers for the third time. The 42 million already sat secure in the trust. The remaining assets, joint holdings, properties, stocks were being rerouted. Legally, silently, she had opened 7 new accounts under 3 shell companies. Everything was backed by legal counsel she retained months ago, quietly off the books. Just in case. Just in case had become this exact moment. She took out the final folder, one she never thought she'd need. Inside, a printed version of the postnuptial agreement. 2 signatures, hers and his. She remembered the night he signed it. They'd been sitting on the kitchen floor eating cold pizza. She had joked about building her own escape hatch. He had laughed, poured her more wine, and signed it with the words, "If I ever mess up, make it count, baby." Now she intended to. Delaney pulled the pen from her coat pocket. Her hand hovered for a second. Then she signed the bottom of the final page. Not with bitterness, with closure. Back in the city, Nico's penthouse remained untouched. The housekeeper had the week off. His calendar said Tokyo next Thursday. He wouldn't be home until the next day. Delaney used the opportunity. She packed only the essentials: documents, prenatal vitamins, one silk blouse, and her mother's diamond pendant. Everything else stayed. Let him have the penthouse. Let him have the art and the smart fridge and the imported sheets. She was taking something far more valuable. Her name, her power, her child. Downstairs, her driver was already waiting. His name was James. He'd worked for her father. Years ago, he didn't ask questions when she slid into the back seat with 2 duffel bags and a phone she'd just activated. Where to, ma'am? Brooklyn. Not the high-rise. The short-term rental on Gates Avenue. Use the back route. James nodded. He'd been driving long enough to know when a woman didn't want to be found. As the skyline dimmed behind them, Delaney rolled down the window and let the wind slap her cheeks. She closed her eyes and pictured Nico walking into the office the next day. No warning. No wife. Just absence. He would search for clues. Find none. He would call her. She would never answer. By the time he figured out what she'd done, it would be too late. At the rental, the apartment was small but warm. She liked that. No voice assistant. No floor-to-ceiling windows. Just real keys and a squeaky heater. She placed the signed post-nup on the kitchen table like a war medal, stared at it a moment, and then reached for the recorder. To my future self, she said softly, pressing record. Tonight you did something brave. You didn't shout. You didn't break anything. You didn't turn into the woman he accused you of being when he got caught. You just walked. And that is going to be the beginning of everything. She stopped the recording. Saved it under a file name only she would recognize. Then she reached for the ultrasound photo she never got to show him. It was still in her purse. Uncreased. Untouched. In the background, the radiator hissed. The street outside had gone quiet. Delaney lay down on the mattress. One hand over her belly. The other over the signed post-nup. She whispered nothing. Not even to herself. Because the war had just begun. And this time, she was the one holding the detonator. The Callahan Industries headquarters hadn't seen this much media traffic since the IPO 5 years ago. 2 full press rows lined the back of the boardroom. Cameras, flashes, whispers. News outlets leaned forward, anticipating the announcement of what insiders were already calling the Amazon merger of the decade. The CEO himself, Nico Callahan, sat at the head of the mahogany table, cufflinks gleaming, wedding band missing. No one asked, because no one dared. He looked calm, collected, a man ready to dominate headlines again, for the right reasons this time. He nodded to his legal counsel. The folder marked acquisition summary slid across the table. Before we proceed, Nico said, adjusting his watch, I want to say thank you for believing in this company, even through distractions. Laughter from the board. A few forced chuckles from the media. Then, the door opened. Every head turned. Delaney walked in. 8 months pregnant. Stilettos clicking on marble. Coat draped elegantly. Over one shoulder. A collective inhale swept the room. No one had seen her in weeks. Rumors swirled. Gossip blogs guessed everything from mental health retreats to fleeing the country. But she was here now, and she wasn't hiding. She didn't speak right away, just walked the full length of the room, past analysts, past shareholders, past legal teams. She reached the table and placed a red-sealed envelope directly in front of Nico. He blinked once. Delaney, he started, rising from his chair. She lifted one hand. The silence returned like a courtroom verdict. For the record, she said clearly, Clause 7b. Infidelity triggers full forfeiture. Gasps. Audible ones. The legal team scrambled. Someone fumbled their coffee. The press leaned forward so fast. A microphone hit the floor. Delaney didn't flinch. She looked Nico in the eye, and then sat down in the chair next to him. Not like a woman returning home, but like one returning to finish something. Nico's lips parted, but no words came out. Delaney reached into her handbag, pulled out her phone, opened an app with a single fingerprint scan. Her finger hovered above the screen. "You once said," she murmured, "that your legacy would outlive anything I could do." She tapped the screen. A digital confirmation beeped. Seconds later, the finance director's tablet lit up. "Transfer complete. $42 million. The Moore Foundation for Widowed Mothers." Nico stared at the number. The same trust he tried to block her from funding when she first mentioned it. The one he mocked at dinner parties. Delaney stood again. "I figured I'd start my new life by giving birth to my values. Not just your name." She turned and walked back out of the boardroom. The same heels, the same calm, except now the entire building knew, and the empire was bleeding from the inside. Delaney didn't rush. She exited the boardroom the way she entered it. Controlled, poised, unreadable. The doors closed behind her like a final chapter. Inside, chaos erupted. One reporter shouted, "Was that real?" Another waved a phone, already live-streaming. A young analyst near the projector whispered, "Did she just end the deal?" Nico remained frozen, hands still on the envelope. He hadn't opened it yet. Didn't need to. He knew what it said. Clause 7b was just one line of legal text. But today it became a hammer. On the street below, Delaney stepped into a waiting car. James, her driver, didn't speak. He'd seen the news alert light up seconds after she stepped inside. "Where to?" he asked quietly. She looked out the window at the glass tower she used to call her legacy. "Home," she said. Not their penthouse. Her Brooklyn apartment. Upstairs in the boardroom, Nico stood. Opened the envelope. Read the terms again, slowly this time. Infidelity results in immediate forfeiture of marital and business equity claims. Pre-agreed asset separation enforced upon violation. All property held in joint trust is to be surrendered unconditionally. His legal counsel's voice was shaking. "She signed this last week, sir. Everything is valid." "She had this ready?" Nico muttered. A new voice chimed in. One of the shareholders. "You didn't think she'd stay quiet, did you?" Outside, reporters flooded the sidewalk. Delaney's photo, heels, bump, envelope hit every news channel within the hour. Headlines exploded. Callahan wife transfers $42 million to charity. Drops infidelity. Bomb in boardroom. Pregnant ex-MRS. Callahan quotes prenup. Triggers massive corporate shift. Wife of tech CEO outplays entire board on camera. Nico's comms team locked the front gates and issued a vague statement about ongoing negotiations. But the world had already taken sides. And Delaney? She was trending. Not as a victim, but as a strategist. Inside the car, Delaney took out her earbuds. Played the recording back. "Tonight, you did something brave." She closed her eyes and let her own voice ground her. The baby kicked once. She pressed her hand gently to her stomach. "You're safe now," she whispered. "Mama's not playing defense anymore." The next morning, the glass lobby of Callahan Industries looked more like a press battlefield than a corporate headquarters. Camera crews swarmed the steps. Security barricaded the front doors. A handful of junior staffers left through the loading dock, sunglasses hiding their faces, badges tucked away. Inside, the crisis team huddled in a second-floor conference room. Nico hadn't slept. His tie was crooked, his face unshaven. His phone buzzed nonstop. "We need to issue a statement," the PR lead said carefully. "Something measured. Something neutral." Nico's eyes didn't lift. "Say it was a misunderstanding." "Sir, say it." They nodded. Interns drafted quotes. Lawyers tweaked phrases. The official response was emailed within the hour. "Mr. Callahan remains focused on company growth and personal healing during this sensitive time." It didn't help. By noon, Sloane Rivas arrived. She didn't sneak in. She walked right past the cameras, chin high, dressed like someone already writing her own redemption arc. Once inside, she didn't go to her desk. She walked straight to the press room. A junior aide tried to stop her. She waved him off. "Trust me, sweetheart. I'm the headline now." She took the podium. The cameras clicked again. I know there's been confusion, she began, adjusting her blouse. But I need to set the record straight. Nico and we've been in love for a long time. I never intended to hurt anyone. But life is complicated. And now, I'm carrying his future. She touched her stomach for emphasis. There was no bump, but the pause sold it. Reporters scribbled. Some gasped. One photographer got the shot. Sloane holding her midsection like she'd just made history. Upstairs, Nico watched from his office. Not live. He was playing back something else. The security feed. From his own boardroom. Delaney walking in. 8 months pregnant. No expression. No hesitation. Handing him that red envelope. Clause 7b. Infidelity triggers full forfeiture. He'd heard the words 10 times. He played it again. The boardroom had been full of power brokers, investors, media. But in that moment it was just her. No rage. No spectacle. Just facts. It wasn't the money that undid him. It was her composure. His assistant knocked. Sir? CNBC wants your reaction to Sloane's statement. He didn't respond. He rewound the tape again. Delaney walking away. Again. And again. Downstairs, Sloane took selfies with junior staffers. She smiled wide. Laughed like someone who'd already won. He'll come around, she whispered to one of them. But Nico wasn't watching her. He was frozen in the past, watching the woman he once promised forever to vanish like a storm no one saw coming. The clinic was quiet. Not the kind of quiet that brings peace, but the kind that swells under fluorescent lights and settles into your skin like fog. Delaney sat in the far corner, away from the windows, away from the women holding clipboards and purses and guilt. Her name wasn't real. The ID she handed over said, Erica Hayes. The address was a P.O. box in Albany. The phone number was a prepaid burner. She stared at the intake form, left most of it blank. Only one line was marked with clarity. How many weeks? 32. The receptionist didn't say much after that. She handed Delaney a wristband. Light blue. She tucked it under her sleeve. The hallway smelled of bleach and old books. She followed the nurse without question. The walls were painted in colors that tried to. Hard to be calming, muted peach, pale mint. The nurse glanced over her chart and gave the kind of smile that professionals learn over years, warm but detached. You're still early enough to have options, the nurse said softly. Delaney's hand pressed gently against her stomach. The baby shifted. Just a flutter. Hiccup of life. I know, Delaney replied. Her voice wasn't cracked. Not yet. The consultation room had one chair and a cot. A monitor stood in the corner. A box of tissues on the counter. A laminated pamphlet with 3 bold words. It's your decision. Delaney didn't touch it. She stared at the floor. The doctor will be in soon, the nurse said. I'll give you some time. The door clicked shut. Delaney didn't move. Not for a while. The last time she'd been in a room like this, Nico was beside her, smiling, holding her hand. The ultrasound tech had joked, that baby's already practicing kicks for the World Cup. Delaney had laughed. Nico had kissed her temple. Now she was sitting alone with a fake name and a future she no longer recognized. The door opened again. This time it was the doctor. A woman, maybe early 40s. Kind eyes. No judgment in her voice. You're Erica? Delaney nodded. The doctor sat, reviewed her chart. Spoke gently, professionally. Explained timelines. Options. Risks. Then she asked, Are you sure? That was it. 3 words. Delaney opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Her hands folded over her belly again. The weight of the child within her felt heavier than ever, not physically, but in the way it pinned her down between 2 impossible truths. This child came from a man who wrecked her without hesitation. But the child itself had done nothing wrong. She blinked back something sharp and whispered, No, that's the problem. The doctor didn't push. She nodded once. Then I'll walk you out. Delaney stepped into the freezing night like someone leaving a courtroom with no verdict. Snow flurried lightly. A wind kicked up the hem of her coat. She wrapped it tighter. Her phone vibrated once. She ignored it, then threw it in the trash bin outside the clinic door. She stood there for a long moment, in the cold, alone, then began to walk. Not toward a cab, not toward a bus, just forward. Her heels clicked against the sidewalk like punctuation marks in a sentence she hadn't finished writing. She didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't stay still. And somehow, that felt like enough. The airport was colder than she expected. Delaney moved through the terminal in a long wool coat and sunglasses, a duffel bag slung over her shoulder, her walk steady but slow. She avoided eye contact, wore no makeup, no signature jewelry, no trace of the woman whose name once trended in finance blogs and bridal magazines. The name on her boarding pass read E. Hayes. She'd booked the ticket hours earlier. One way, cash only, Montreal. No one would think to look for her in Canada. She didn't bring a coat for the snow, only the ultrasound photo, still tucked into her journal. The gate was quiet. Most passengers were families heading home, tired business travelers, slouched over phones. No one noticed the woman sitting by the window, gently rubbing her stomach and staring into clouds. She didn't eat, didn't sleep, didn't speak. She simply boarded when called, settled into an aisle seat toward the back, and stared forward, like she was watching her past dissolve through the windshield. 2 hours into the flight, the pain started. Not sharp, not sudden, just enough to make her shift in her seat. Her hand gripped the armrest. Her eyes flicked to the flight attendant passing by. "Water?" Delaney asked, voice low. Right away. She didn't mention the cramps, didn't want attention, but the second wave hit harder. A deep pressure that wrapped around her lower back and pulled. She gritted her teeth, pressed both hands to her belly. Not now, not here. 30 minutes later, the cabin lights dimmed for descent. Except Delaney's body had other plans. She doubled over once, then again, then couldn't sit up. The woman beside her reached out. "Are you okay?" Delaney shook her head, breath short. I think it's happening." The flight attendant rushed over. Panic rippled through the rear cabin. "We need medical assistance. Is there a doctor on board?" Someone hit the call button. A man in 3C stood up. "Nurse." He rushed back. Delaney clutched his wrist. "I'm 32 weeks. Okay, we'll take care of you." But they were still in the air. The pilot announced an emergency landing. "We're 37 minutes out. Please remain calm." But the ground traffic was backed up. Weather, icy runways, delays. Delaney couldn't hold it. Her body betrayed her. The contractions came faster, sharper, closer. The nurse did what he could, towels, breath coaching, soft reassurance. But the pain overtook everything. By the time the plane touched down, her screams had faded into silence. The EMTs rushed in with a stretcher. Blood stained her thighs. Her fingers were clenched around the edge of her coat. She was barely conscious. The hospital lights blurred as they wheeled her in. Monitors beeped. Nurses yelled terms she didn't understand. Then someone touched her hand gently. "Ma'am, we're so sorry." She blinked. Words fell flat. "If we'd landed 10 minutes earlier." The sentence didn't finish. Because it didn't matter. She never got to name them. A boy, a girl, 10 fingers each, wrapped in white blankets and taken away before she could speak. Hours later, Delaney lay in a recovery room. The doctor asked if she wanted to see them. She said no, not because she didn't care, but because she already knew she'd never recover if she did. The window was cracked. Snow fell quietly. She turned away from it, closed her eyes, and let the world go mute. The chapel was empty. No music, no priest, no eulogy. Just a narrow hallway in the basement of the hospital, a folding chair and 2 identical boxes, small, white, sealed. Delaney sat alone in the back row. No flowers, no prayers, just silence. The nurse who had stayed with her through the night placed a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to speak." Delaney nodded. She didn't plan to. She wasn't sure she could. The The hospital offered a burial option. Unmarked, quiet, paid for in cash. She agreed without blinking, not because she didn't care, but because naming them would mean holding them, and she wasn't sure she would ever get back up if she did. Later that night, she took a cab to a tiny funeral home on the edge of the city. The director was kind, soft-spoken, efficient. He asked her to sign a form. She used her alias. The final resting place would be in a city she had no ties to. She requested no marker, no return contact. At the service, only the funeral director stood beside her. The wind picked up. Snow fell like ash. Delaney stared at the ground. "I'm sorry I didn't get to know you," she whispered. "But I want you to know. Didn't walk away from you." Her voice cracked. "I walked away so you wouldn't grow up watching me get smaller every year." She touched the edge of the stone before turning away. Back at her apartment, the city pulsed as if nothing had happened. Taxis honked. Sirens wailed in the distance. Life went on. But inside the brownstone flat, something had shifted. Delaney opened her closet, took out every gown, blazer, and evening dress Nico had ever bought her. She packed them into a trash bag. Then she pulled out the shoebox labeled before. Inside were things that predated the empire. A handwritten recipe from her grandmother. A necklace her sister made in college. An old journal filled with dreams that never involved private jets or red carpets. She placed them carefully on her nightstand, one by one. That night she didn't cry. She didn't eat. She simply lay in bed, a single lamp glowing beside her, writing a letter she wouldn't sign. "To the woman I used to be, I'm sorry I abandoned you. I thought love would keep us both safe. I thought forever meant protection. I was wrong." She folded the letter, tucked it inside her journal, closed the lid. At dawn, Delaney walked 4 blocks to a UPS store and shipped the journal to a P.O. box in North Carolina. She didn't want to burn it. She just wanted it far away. Then she returned home, poured herself a cup of tea, and stared at her reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back didn't look broken. She looked unfamiliar, and that somehow was progress. There was no press blackout. In fact, the media blitz seemed louder than ever. 3 weeks after the boardroom collapse, Sloane Rivas stood on the steps of a Manhattan boutique hotel, dressed in ivory and pearls, flanked by 2 publicists and a paid stylist. She hadn't just embraced the scandal, she'd monetized it. Paparazzi lined the curb. Morning shows ran live segments. Bloggers spun theories. She held her stomach like it was already showing. "We didn't plan this," she said, gazing into the camera with carefully rehearsed vulnerability. "But love sometimes happens where it's least expected. I never meant to hurt Delaney. I respected her. But now, I'm carrying the future of the Callahan legacy." Not one reporter challenged the timeline. Not one voice asked how long this future had been brewing before Delaney disappeared. Because Sloane knew how to work the narrative. And the public loves a redemption arc with a baby in it. Across the river, in a quiet cafe in Williamsburg, Delaney watched the press conference on a muted wall screen. The closed captioning scrolled across the bottom as Sloane dabbed invisible tears. She stirred her tea once, twice, didn't blink. The waiter passed her table, noticed the broadcast, and frowned. "Isn't that the guy whose wife exposed him? Rough stuff." Delaney smiled politely. People believe whatever fits their favorite version of the story. She didn't look away from the screen, because she needed to see it. She needed to watch Sloane's parade unfold, to feel it, name it, and let it pass through her, without stealing anything else. There was a time she might have cried. Now, she just took another sip of tea. Back at Callahan Industries, the walls were cracking. Investors grew nervous. The stock, though still strong, was showing stress fractures from the PR noise. Nico declined interviews, issued one-line statements, avoided being photographed. He hadn't responded to Sloane's public performance. Not once. And that was intentional, because he was still watching the footage from the boardroom. He kept the clip on his phone. Delaney's heels on the marble. The red envelope. Her face when she said, Clause 7B. He'd seen it enough to know it frame by frame, not because he missed her, but because he still didn't understand how she beat him. In a luxury apartment uptown, Sloane practiced her baby bump pose in the mirror. Her assistant stood behind her, organizing press kits and mock invitations for a private engagement celebration. Do you think he'll go through with it? The assistant asked. The wedding. Sloane smirked. He will. He has no choice. Public perception is everything. She turned slightly, pressing her palm against her stomach with just enough flair for the lens. And I'm the only thing he has left. But across the city, in an unlisted apartment beneath an alias lease, Delaney closed her laptop. After the interview ended, she picked up her journal, wrote just 2 lines, let them chase the cameras. I'll build what can't be seen. She folded the page, slid it under her mattress, and got ready. The cathedral wasn't new. In fact, it was the same one Delaney once circled in a wedding magazine and dog-eared with a hopeful grin. They'd never made it that far back then. Too busy, too distracted, too many zeros attached to the merger. But now, Nico booked the entire place for a private event. No press yet, just white-gloved staff, string quartets on standby, and florists building centerpieces taller than the altar. The Callahan name could still command opulence. He just wasn't sure it could still inspire loyalty. Inside the venue, he stood near the altar, suit tailored to precision. The event planner walked through logistics. The dress? Arrived. The rings? Engraved. The guest list? Curated for headlines. He barely heard her. His eyes were on the pews, imagining her, Delaney, not in the crowd, but walking down that aisle, not with forgiveness, but with closure. Days earlier, he had sent the dress, her dress, to an untraceable courier with a single instruction: deliver without return address. No message, no tracking. The only addition was a sticky note. 5 words. You still deserve this. No name, no initials. Just a whisper from a man who knew he had nothing left to say. Backstage, Sloane examined the seating chart like she was planning a coup. Why is she still on here? She asked Nico's assistant, pointing at Delaney's name. The assistant fumbled. He insisted. She's not coming, Sloane snapped. The assistant didn't respond, because he wasn't so sure. In his suite, Nico rehearsed his speech. Not for Sloane, for her, Delaney. In his mind, she would arrive just as the doors opened. He would take her hand, say the words he had never said when they mattered. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, just the chance to stand beside you again. He rehearsed it aloud, once, twice, then stood there, looking into the mirror. But he didn't see himself. He saw a man trying to rewrite history with a fantasy. The dress fit her perfectly. It always had. And now, somewhere in the city, Delaney unfolded the silk once more, ran her fingers over the lace. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She simply zipped it back into the garment bag and laid it flat across her bed. Then she picked up the envelope she had written days ago, the final one, and placed it gently inside her clutch. The cathedral was dressed in wealth. Velvet runners lined the aisles. Crystals hung from towering floral arches. Pianist played. Something soft, expensive, forgettable. Guests whispered behind manicured fingers. Have you seen her? Is she really pregnant? Where's the bride? Nico stood at the altar. His hands were steady, but his jaw clenched with every tick of the clock. Sloane was late. Or maybe she wasn't the one he was waiting for. A hush fell over the room as the back doors creaked open. No music played. No fanfare. Just silence. And then, he saw her. Delaney. She stepped inside with her head high, her frame leaner, her gaze sharper. A different woman, but unmistakably her. Gasps rippled through the pews. Phones stayed tucked away. No one dared speak. She walked the aisle like it owed her something. And for once, everyone agreed it did. Nico didn't move, didn't breathe, until she stopped in front of him. The guests leaned forward. He took a half step closer. You came, he whispered. She didn't nod, didn't smile, just opened her clutch, and handed him an envelope. I'm not here for forgiveness, she said. I'm here to end the sentence you started. He opened the letter with trembling hands. Delaney turned around before he could read the first line. She didn't wait. She didn't look back. Guests parted for her like a tide. Not one person stood to stop her. Not even Sloane, who had just appeared at the top of the stairs in a fitted white gown, confused and breathless. Delaney didn't see her, didn't need to. At the door, she paused. Not for dramatics, but because that was the last time she would ever look at Nico Callahan with expectation. And in that pause, she felt nothing. Not rage, not regret, not even relief, just distance. The kind you don't come back from. Outside, the cold slapped her bare shoulders. She didn't flinch. She stepped into the waiting black car, closed the door, and let the past collapse behind her. The envelope felt heavier than paper. Nico stood alone at the altar, fingers tracing the seal she'd left behind. The guests didn't move. Sloane hovered halfway down the aisle, her mouth slightly open, veil still untouched. But all eyes were on him. He broke the seal and began to read. To my future self, if he ever cheats, walks away, or makes you feel invisible, don't scream, don't beg, just walk. You wrote this 10 years ago, and now you need it more than ever. You thought love was enough. You thought building an empire together meant safety. Didn't. He loved the sound of your laugh, but not the silence of your anger. He loved your light, but expected you to keep shining even when he dimmed it. Nico's hands trembled. He turned to the next page. If you're reading this, it means you finally stopped shrinking yourself for someone else's comfort. It means you remembered who you were before he crowned himself your purpose. You are not disposable. You are not an accessory to anyone's legacy. And when you leave, leave like the storm he never saw coming. He stopped reading aloud, but the letter didn't stop speaking. In his head, her voice took over. Calm. Sure. Clear. You built this empire on my back, and now I'm done carrying it. Don't come looking for me. Don't romanticize this. You had everything, and still asked for more. You took what was soft and made it suffer. So now I leave you with silence. The kind you can't fix with flowers or money or press releases. He folded the letter slowly, looked out at the sea of frozen guests, then toward the back doors, still swinging from her exit. She wasn't coming back, and now the whole room knew it. Upstairs, Sloane finally moved, tossed the bouquet onto a nearby table, and disappeared through a side hallway, heels clicking faster with every step. No one followed her, because the wedding was over, before it ever began. Outside, a light snow began to fall. Delaney sat in the back seat of the car, window cracked. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She simply stared ahead as the driver pulled off from the curb. In her lap was the garment bag. Inside, the wedding dress she never wore, folded neatly, untouched, just like the version of herself that used to wait for love to come correct. The altar was still. Guests whispered behind hands. Some stood, unsure if they should remain seated or follow the bride who never arrived. But Nico didn't move. He clutched the folded letter in one hand, the other still resting at his side like a man who had forgotten how to fight. Sloane stood in the aisle, dressed tight against her frame, lips pressed into a forced smile that couldn't mask the panic growing behind her eyes. She waited for him to say something. Anything. He didn't. Not to her. Not to anyone. The string quartet in the corner slowly stopped playing. One by one, guests began to rise, gathering coats and murmuring their goodbyes. There would be no toasts, no reception, no headlines celebrating new beginnings. Only a name now soaked in quiet disgrace. Sloane finally walked toward the front, heels slicing into the carpet like knives. She humiliated you, she hissed. In front of your board, the press, your investors. Nico turned to her slowly. His eyes were hollow, not angry. You think I didn't deserve it? Sloane blinked. You're letting her win. She already won. He stepped off the altar, brushed past her. And you were never the prize. Her mouth parted, but no words came. He continued walking, to the front of the cathedral, to the double doors she had walked through moments before. He didn't chase her, didn't expect her, but he needed to breathe where she had once stood. Security approached quietly. One leaned toward Nico. Do you want us to escort Ms. Rivas out? He didn't hesitate. Yes. Publicly. Let her choose. Sloane turned just as the guards approached. This isn't over, she warned, voice brittle. It was never real, Nico replied. He didn't look back as she was led through a side door, her gown bunching awkwardly around. Her waist, her face stiff with disbelief. Outside, press waited for a shot that never came. No couple, no kiss. Just a man in a dark suit with no ring, and no bride. Upstairs, in a private lounge, Nico sat alone. The planner came to ask if he wanted the venue cleared. He nodded. A few minutes later, he stood again. Walked to the mirror near the bar. Took off his tie. Stared at himself. And whispered. She left with everything that mattered. The sedan moved quietly through the Lower East Side, gliding past streetlights and fading storefronts. Delaney sat in the back seat, her face turned toward the window. She wasn't crying. She wasn't smiling. She was simply still. In her lap rested the garment bag, folded, pressed, and used. The same wedding dress she once dreamed of wearing. The same dress she refused to let define her ending. She had brought it to the cathedral out of habit. A final test. A symbol of who she used to be. And now, as the snow collected on the windshield, she knew it wasn't hers anymore. Not because someone else had taken it, but because she had outgrown it. The driver glanced in the rearview mirror. Is the airport still the destination, ma'am? She nodded once. LaGuardia. Terminal C. International. No. Just somewhere. Without a name. He didn't ask again. On the passenger seat beside her, a journal sat closed. No title. No lock. Just worn leather, stitched by hand. Something her mother had gifted her on her wedding day. It had once been filled with plans. Family homes, baby names, holiday menus. Now it was empty again. Fresh pages. Unwritten. As they crossed the East River, Delaney watched the skyline shrink behind her. Not with regret, but with quiet relief. She had tried to build a life in that city. Had loved. Had carried. Had bent until she cracked. But she'd never break again. Not for anyone. At a red light, she unzipped the garment bag. Touched the fabric gently. White silk. Intricate lace. Perfect. Still perfect. But she wouldn't keep it. She folded it neatly. Pressed it down with her palm. And whispered not to the dress, but to herself. You deserved more than a ceremony. You deserved freedom. The car pulled into the departures lane. Delaney opened the door herself. The driver reached for her bags. She waved him off. Thank you for getting me here. He paused. Nodded. Good luck, ma'am. She gave a small, genuine smile. I don't need luck anymore. Just peace. Inside the airport, she didn't rush. She moved slowly, purposefully. She wasn't escaping. She was choosing. Choosing silence over spectacle. Self-worth over applause. Peace over promises. Before heading to security, she paused near a donation bin. It was labeled, Gowns for Healing, for Women Rebuilding After Abuse and Loss. She unzipped the bag, folded the dress carefully inside, closed the lid, and walked away. Not fast. Not dramatically. Just forward. 3 weeks passed. No press release. No follow-up interview. No social media post. Delaney Moore vanished without a whisper. Bloggers speculated. Podcasters debated. Talk shows reran the boardroom clip with fresh captions and old guesses. But no one knew where she went. Nico tried to work. Tried to sleep. Tried to function. But everywhere he looked, something reminded him of her. The scent of bergamot in the elevator. A silent elevator ride that mimicked the tension in their final weeks. An untouched letter in the drawer of his desk, addressed to no one, but clearly meant for her. On a Wednesday morning, he left his building without telling anyone. No driver. No security. Just a long coat, sunglasses, and a desperate instinct. He walked for hours through Manhattan, down through the East Village, past the old bookstore she used to love, past the first restaurant they celebrated at when Callahan Industries crossed 10 million in revenue, and then he found himself in the Bronx. The cafe was small, quiet, and forgettable. No buzz, no influencers, no cameras, just the smell of fresh muffins and the low hum of jazz. Nico stepped inside, rubbing his hands together against the cold. Ordered black coffee, turned to find a seat, and then he saw her. She was by the window, reading a book. Hair shorter, skin clearer, back straighter. A soft beige sweater hugged her shoulders, and next to her on the bench was a simple tote bag and a half-eaten croissant. She looked at peace. He froze. Time didn't slow. It just stopped altogether. His feet moved without permission. He stepped closer. Couldn't speak yet. Couldn't breathe properly. She turned a page, eyes never leaving the book. He stood beside the table. Finally gathered his voice. "Delaney." She looked up. Blink. Pause. A soft smile. "You have the wrong person." It wasn't cruel. It wasn't cold. Just factual. And final. She returned to her book. Like he was nothing more than a curious interruption. Like she'd never memorized the curve of his jaw or the cadence of his walk. He stood there dumbstruck, hands in his coat, mouth slightly parted. But she didn't look back. Not even when he turned and walked out. Outside, the snow had returned. He stepped into it. And for the first time in his life, Nico Callahan didn't know what to do next. Delaney didn't flinch when he walked away. She didn't even mark the moment with a breath. She simply turned another page, finished her tea, folded the corner of her book and slipped it into her tote, and rose. Outside, the snow had thickened. She pulled on a soft knit beanie, wrapped her scarf twice, and stepped into the cold like someone born for it. No rush, no destination anyone could track. Just a quiet freedom in her walk, and a stillness Nico would never understand. 3 blocks from the cafe, she paused at a crosswalk. A child tugged at her coat, laughing, pointing at her boots. His mother apologized. Delaney smiled. "He's curious. Let him be." The child grinned and gave a wave. Delaney waved back, then crossed the street. She didn't carry a phone. She didn't need one. No calls, no maps, no need to be found. She had memorized the route to her new studio, a small loft space above a florist shop that didn't take digital payments and didn't ask too many questions. Inside, the walls were bare. One mattress, one desk, a notebook filled with business plans that didn't involve investors or platforms. Just names of women. Women she wanted to help. Women who'd been pushed aside, dismissed, humiliated, or quietly erased, like she had been. She'd already registered the nonprofit under a different name. More Light Foundation. No press. No launch party. Just paperwork and action. She'd start by hosting workshops. Financial literacy. Prenuptial literacy. Emotional exit planning. A roadmap for the woman who doesn't want to stay, but doesn't know how to leave. She set her tote down, lit a small candle by the window, took off her coat, and stood there, watching the snow cover the street below. She pressed her fingers to the glass, not in longing, but in triumph. Behind her, a photo sat on the desk. Not of Nico, not of the wedding, but of 2 tiny footprints stamped on hospital paper, faded but permanent. She touched them gently. "You never made it here, but you gave me the courage to." She didn't look back, because there was nothing left behind her worth turning for. "I loved him once, with everything I had, with the kind of love that bends, stretches, and waits, even when it hurts. But sometimes, love just isn't enough. Sometimes the apology comes too late. Sometimes, silence is louder than promises. And sometimes, the only way to save yourself is to leave the version of you who waited too long behind. I didn't rebuild my life to prove I could. I rebuilt it so I'd never forget who I was before I handed him everything. Before the penthouse. Before the boardroom. before betrayal became routine. And now I help women remember what they were worth before the world tried to sell them a different story. I started with a folding chair, a whiteboard, one name mine. I didn't need branding. I needed purpose. And I found it in every woman who sat across from me and whispered, "I don't know where to start." And I got to look her in the eye and say, "You just did. This isn't revenge. This is recovery. I don't need him to feel pain. I needed me to find peace. And I did. Not with noise, not with vengeance, but with a door that stayed closed behind me. Forgiveness? That's optional. Healing? That's mine. You don't need a platform to be powerful. You don't need a crown to matter. Sometimes the loudest revolution is a quiet exit. Sometimes the biggest win is walking away without explaining a single thing. And to the women who believed their story ended with heartbreak, didn't. It just changed authors. I'm no longer waiting to be chosen. I already chose myself. If you believe that silence can be strength, if you believe walking away isn't weakness, but wisdom, and if you believe more women need to hear stories like this one, then help us tell them. Like this video, share it, subscribe to Mr. Hearthline Stories, and tell us where you're listening from. Until next time.